We found out I had become pregnant. From Colonel Gaddafi. 5 strange and questionable confessions of Reddit. I cheated on my wife so I could have children and it was a terrible mistake. This is probably way too specific but I don't care anymore. I married a girl who didn't want to have children. I always did. We fought about it at first but then she let on that she'd be okay with it. Eventually. Well, that didn't happen. We got married and there were terrific times and awful times, but overall it was a decline over the years until we both realized that it wasn't going to work anymore. I'm making it sound as if we parted on an equal understanding of our incompatibility. Nah. That's not what happened. In fact, I pined away for a much younger woman for years while I worked on her as a sort of side opportunity. As in, I groomed her, she was of age, while I continued my marriage because I'm like a monkey who needs another branch to grab onto before he lets go of the last one. Sick. So anyhow, I cheated on my wife, then I told her I did, and it broke her heart. I moved on, divorced, remarried, impregnated this new person, who I was not nearly as compatible with, and here I am, the proud father of a beautiful wonderful child. I love my child more than anything on the earth but I do not get along with the mother, and I fear that it's going to end in tragic divorce. I would never leave her but she may just leave me out of incompatibility. She says she never would, but I don't believe it. I don't believe anything because I'm the king of lies and I don't trust anyone, ever. So long story short, I basically wanted to die all the time. I hate my job, I hate my life, my relationship horrifies me, and I know I'm going to end up alone with the only thing I love, my perfect child, taken away from me and endless suffering. My ex was right. I cannot handle this. I think I am a wonderful father but I should have taken more time to do this. I should have searched for someone I was compatible with instead of just marrying and knocking up the next convenient fling. I'm going to pay for this and I don't want to. I'm tired of being nervous. I'm tired of thinking. I'm horrified of death but sometimes it seems like the end of worry would be such a release. Then my dumb butt would be out of the way at least and the world could go on living, and my wife could find a new man in time for my kid to not remember me. I'm not immediately suicidal so don't engage in internet heroics on my behalf, please, but I am severely depressed. I am ready to do anything just for attention. First of all, some background, I am a 17-year-old female who didn't have the happiest childhood. My mother was always asleep, and never really cared about me. I got abused, both physically and mentally, and bullied a lot. I actually live with my aunt, who always took well care of me, and gave me attention. I don't know when it exactly started, but I used to do a lot of bad things, simply to satisfy my need of attention. I started by telling everyone I was a cannibal, then cry when they would call me that. I harmed myself and I even faked depression to some of my friends. I also tried to convince myself I was psychopath, and auto-diagnosed myself with a lot of medical conditions. More than that, the only condition I really have is narcissism, and all of that helped me to keep people centered around me. I even planned to kill someone once, then wanted to turn myself in, since I knew I would have a lot of attention. I didn't do it though, not because I wouldn't be able to, but because I'm scared of my aunt. I also told people I was trans and told others I was schizophrenic. I wish I could get rid of this need, but I am not able to. I fake things pretty well, so people always believe me. My friend is overweight and I don't agree with her #body positivity. I have a very close friend who I love to bits. She has a massively bubbly personality, she's kind and is an overall a very good person. She is overweight, to the point of morbidly obese. I've known her for 7 years and during the time I've known her, she's always been a big girl. It has never bothered me, and I've always looked past her weight. It wasn't until last autumn when she posted a picture of herself with the caption "Love who you are no matter what" and #body positivity that I started to have thoughts about confronting her about it. Like I said, I don't have an issue with how my friend chooses to live her life. I just find it difficult to read her posts, knowing that she's been struggling with weight loss and is now suddenly just accepting her body. I see overweight as any other substance abuse and don't agree that you should beautify or glorify it. Personally, I don't judge people for how they want to live. However, I don't give in to the mindset that being overweight is a goal that should be strived for or be content with. Don't get me wrong, a person who has curves, and a person who is overweight to me are widely different. I love my friend and believe that this movement is just an excuse for her to finally accept herself, which to me is sad. I want her to accept herself, but still continue losing excess weight so she may live a long and prosperous life. I have never confronted her about her weight earlier. It's a given fact which she doesn't need to hear constantly about. I am just afraid that people in her life are sugarcoating her feeds with positivity instead of giving her proper feedback. I don't know, I feel as I am in the wrong no matter what I choose to do. I despise ghetto blacks and feel threatened in their presence. So today, my lady friend and I took a stroll in the city park. It's always really quiet in the park where all the museums are at. Being one of the first decent days in many months, we thought it would be great to get out and visit the art museum. Haven't gone there in a long time. It just so happened there was some kind of event for a radio station right outside of the museum. Today is Pi Day, and my area code is 314, so the station was having some kind of party thing. It was nothing but Lil Wayne, hundreds of rowdy ghetto trash blacks, and lots of littering. It's worth adding that the park is usually very quiet, and I hate to say it, full of responsible regular people, of all races. My girlfriend and I figured we could just navigate around the crowd and go inside. Well, not even the first horde of blacks we see stare us down and start talking about us at full volume. Normally, I would say something, but it's 5 black dudes versus 1 clean-cut white guy. My girlfriend looks down the hallway and then some dude comes by us and tells us to leave and that we aren't welcome there, in much more unpleasant terms. Eyes. Dozens of pairs of eyes giving us nasty stares. Meanwhile the police are showing up by the car full, might I add, to quell the situation. It was the first time in my life I experienced a blood-boiling hatred for an entire group of people. I have a good number of very nice black friends, but the ghetto ones anger me to no end. Another first for me was the one to have a firearm on me. I know I shouldn't feel like this, but I hate it when someone hates me even though they don't even know me. I am not a conservative, but I can definitely see where many get their views from. We coddle ghetto blacks and scream bloody murder when one gets shot by a non-black. Yet ghetto blacks kill and beat both blacks and non-blacks all the time, yet those stories never make the news. Anyway, we decided to just go to a different part of the park, but the anger has yet to leave me. I had an affair with Colonel Gaddafi in the late 80s. In 1988 I had an affair with Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, and in light of reading excerpts from Gaddafi's harem I decided to share my story. Some have suggested I have Stockholm Syndrome, I cannot say. Also I was a bit cautious with what I posted on Reddit, but I suppose I'll tell the full story now, might as well. I was raised by a single father, he worked as an FSO and we moved around quite often. My mother was an Italian national whom he divorced not long after I was born. My father had a son from a previous marriage and he wanted my brother and I to have contact, although we had little since he lived with his mother in NYC. My dad and I weren't particularly close, despite spending most every waking minute with each other. He had developed an addiction to benzodiazepines and, while he was able to function, remembered little of what happened during his binges. In '88 I was 15, I was worldly, having been to most of Europe and a few far-flung countries, but I was also extremely naive considering most of my social interaction was with my father. My dad was to attend a summit in a European city, I cannot say what or where without perhaps compromising myself, and naturally I tagged along. I didn't attend the meeting, but I accompanied my father to the reception. A fairly nice affair, to a teenager it was reminiscent of an awards show. I mostly was interested in coming because Colonel Gaddafi was going to attend with his delegation, I believe he had an interview with some foreign TV station. It wasn't long after the Tripoli air raids and he was supposedly a very dangerous man, though I found him handsome. The Libyan table was perhaps 4 tables down, and I remember leaning back in my chair to see him. At some point he looked in my direction and our eyes met. I immediately looked away and back down at my food. After a few seconds I looked back up and saw him still staring. I felt embarrassed. After dinner my father retired for another night of drug-fueled oblivion at our hotel. Our hotel wasn't particularly fancy, but I got my own room since I was a big girl now. At some point I remember hearing a knock at my father's door and him answering, undoubtedly hi. The hotel was one where there was a locked door between rooms, so I tried to listen in. It's a shame I didn't know the glass to the door trick. The person left my father and there was a knock on my door. I looked out and there was this burly-looking woman in a dress suit. When I answered she told me to come with her, that it was important and my father knew. She took me in a nice car to a fancy hotel in the city center. She yanked me around and was generally rude. She told me that Gaddafi had seen me at the reception and wanted to ask me a few questions. Naturally I was terrified, thinking I was in trouble and about to be murdered. I met Muammar in his room. I was afraid at first, but after a fairly long conversation and a few drinks, milk, oddly, I began to feel fairly relaxed. His English was good, surprisingly, and he was rather soft-spoken. He was curious to know why I was staring, and wanted to meet me personally. Now, for a socially deprived teenager, this attention, especially from a grown-up, was exhilarating. I remember laughing, but not really knowing how to answer. Now, I won't get detailed on what happened next. I was above the age of consent in that particular country and willing. With me there's a bit of cognitive dissonance with how he's been portrayed and how he was with me, night and day. I don't know if he changed after me, or if the other stories are lies. I'd like to think that they were. He held me during most of the night, talking about a number of things. Sometimes going off in Arabic. I just sat and listened. I recall him saying that he and his wife were not doing well, and he had been very lonely. She blamed him for the air raids. He told me I was a great comfort and I would have made a good wife. I remember Judd flat out saying that I wanted to stay with him, let him take me away from my father and the constant moving. He was quiet for a long while before saying that our paths were meant to cross only briefly, but I would be his in paradise. He was very kind and loving, certainly the best I've ever been treated in my life. At the end of the week I was returned to my hotel and my father was up around lunch. I didn't mention my week and he didn't ask. We stayed in that country for another 2 weeks before briefly returning to Malta. It was around the time that we were to move that I began to fall ill, vomiting like clockwork every morning. My father took me to a clinic to be treated for the flu, and we found out I had become pregnant. He was furious, saying I'd ruined my life, you know, all that stuff a dad would say to his daughter upon such news. He asked who the father was and I made up a lie about someone I had met at a bar while he was asleep in his room. He was terribly embarrassed, and took time off to take me home. Thankfully, for my sake, Malta had good relations with Libya and I was able to send a letter to Muammar, telling him of what had happened. He had an address you could send fan mail, different times though the consulate there. Nearly 3 months later we had moved back to the US. My father was considering sending me to my mother, but was on the fence. I was taking classes at a local prep school. We were devout Catholics. One afternoon he asked me if I had made a friend. He held up a letter covered in stamps and beat to hell and back. I shook my head no and took it. When I opened it, a slip of paper slid out with a letter. The paper was a visa of sort, green border with a holographic stamp. The letter was handwritten, from Muammar. I didn't get to read it closely because my dad put 2 and 2 together and snatched it from me. I recall it saying not to be afraid, that he had thought of me over the last few months and regretted not saying yes to me. That I was welcome to come, if I so wanted, and be a second wife, albeit secretly, that I would be loved and cared for. I remember seeing the color drain from my father's face as he read it. He shook it in my face saying, "Who wrote this, Anna? Who?" He grabbed me by my hair and shook me. I confessed everything. I don't remember much after that. He punched the wall. I could hear him yelling, but I don't remember what. He dragged me to my room and locked me in. I stayed there for the next 2 days. When he came around he said that he had to take me to a gynecologist appointment. I got dressed and went with him. I felt like something was wrong when we didn't go to my normal doctor, but a clinic I had never been to. The nurse took me back to a room and put an IV in my arm. I remember the doctor, or at least who I thought was the doctor, come in and say something to the effect of, "Relax, you won't feel a thing, this will all be over soon." I remember jumping up in this blind panic, yanking out the IV, slinging blood everywhere. The nurse tried to hold me down, but I nearly bit off her finger. I turned to go towards the door, but whatever drug they put into the IV began to kick in. I felt lightheaded and must have knocked something over, because I remember hearing a clanging noise. That's the last I remember. My dad took me home. We did not speak. I went to my room and stayed there for 3 days, only leaving to go to the bathroom to try to clean myself. I bled for days. On the 3rd day he came up begging me to eat something. I told him to go away. He began to cry and told me how sorry he was, and that I was to have a son. I ate dinner that night and we never mentioned it again. In my life I attempted to have relationships with 3 other men. I slept with 2. They were terrible experiences and I swore off men. I had fallen in love with Muammar, and have never overcome it. I seriously considered suicide a couple of times, and even attempted to run away when I was 18. I never got another letter. My father became severely ill and died in the months leading up to the Libyan revolution. I was his main caretaker, being as my brother lived far away. He knew he was dying and made a confession to me, that there had been other letters. The letters came at roughly 6-month intervals until the visa had expired. He read them and burned them while I was away at college. He said that the only one that stood out was the last, coming a few months before the visa expired. It had read something to the effect of, "I understand your decision to no longer remain in contact, but at least grant me the privilege of sending a photograph of you and my child." That day I made the decision to travel to Libya, when the revolution had died down. I was so sure it would, but it didn't. Funny how life works, isn't it? I exist now, don't really live, just exist. Between the nightmares and crippling depression I exist. I keep going, if only for the memory of him. This has been my confession. After 30 years it's good to be honest about my life. So many who know me have never truly known me. I don't want attention, I don't want to write the next great tell-all, I don't want any TV interviews, just to tell my story, here and now. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos. Click the right box for the Confessions playlist. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories. And find the original posts linked in the video description for more information.